First, an almost 6-hour hearing in the High Court today saw a dramatic twist in the highly anticipated trial of S Iswaran, the former Transport Minister convicted on charges he received gifts while in office. At the start of the trial, a decision by prosecutors to replace 2 corruption charges with 2 lesser charges under Section 165 of the Penal Code. It saw the trial proceed with only 5 charges, including 4 offences related to public servants obtaining valuable things and 1 charge of obstruction of justice. The 62-year-old admitted to all 5. The court judge said the remaining 30 charges Iswaran faces will be taken into consideration in deciding how he will be punished. Prosecutors are seeking 6 to 7 months in prison combined for the charges, while the defence is hoping for no more than 8 weeks. Sentencing has been set for next Thursday. Well, the court also heard that Iswaran voluntarily paid back more than $380,000 to the state a day before the trial. Now, here's a look at the 5 charges Iswaran pleaded guilty to. In September 2017, Iswaran obtained 10 green room tickets to the 2017 Formula One Grand Prix from Malaysian businessman Ong Beng Seng. Now, these tickets were valued at more than 42,000 Singapore dollars. In December 2022, Iswaran took an outbound flight on a private plane from Singapore to Doha, stayed a night at the Four Seasons Hotel Doha, and then took a business class flight from Doha back to Singapore. Now, these were all once again paid for by Ong, valued at more than $20,000 there. In May 2023, Iswaran obstructed justice by making a payment of $5,700 to Singapore GP Private Limited for the cost of a business class flight ticket from Doha to Singapore. The flight was at the expense of Mr. Ong through Singapore GP. Now, in January 2022, he obtained 14 bottles of whiskey and wine from Lam Kok Seng, the director of Lam Chang Holdings. Now, that's a construction firm that is currently involved in multiple Singapore government projects. The alcohol was valued at about $3,200. June 2022, Iswaran obtained a Brompton T-Line bicycle from Lam, valued at almost $8,000. A CNA reporter, Jeraldine Yap, was there for the proceedings and tells us how the trial unfolded in the High Court.
It was described as a one-of-a-kind criminal trial in recent history. Just after 9 a.m. at Singapore's High Court, former Transport Minister S Iswaran, flanked by his lawyers, arrived to a barrage of cameras and microphones. He gave a brief greeting to members of the media before entering the building. All eyes had been on this day, with about 40 members of the media and public packing the courtroom for the 10 a.m. start. Among them, Iswaran's wife and family. Then came the first twist of the day. The prosecution moved forward 5 lesser charges only, including some related to billionaire property tycoon Ong Beng Seng. 2 corruption charges Iswaran had originally faced were amended at the 11th hour to charges of obtaining valuable items as a public servant. Iswaran's lead lawyer, Davinder Singh, said his client would be taking, quote, a certain course of action given this development. It was the first sign of what was to come. Then, confirmation from the man himself. He rose before the judge and pleaded guilty. It was the second surprise of the day in this highly watched trial. Iswaran's admission coming on the back of a promise to prove his innocence. Mr. Singh said the guilty plea didn't come earlier because Iswaran did not agree with the corruption charges. Both sides then made their sentencing submissions, the prosecution arguing for a jail term of 6 to 7 months and the defence a jail term of no more than 8 weeks. Among the mitigating factors cited by the defence, one was that Iswaran had paid about $380,000 back to the state and surrendered other gifts he had received, including alcohol and golf clubs. And this was done immediately after he was informed of the amended charges. The defence also said that Iswaran's charges had caused minimal to no no harm to others, a point that the prosecution disagreed with. The prosecution said that the government's impartiality had been impacted by the case. The prosecution and defense also clashed on various other points. The prosecution argued that the charges Iswaran faced required no quid pro quo on the part of the public servant. The defense, however, said the gifts were given to Iswaran in the context of his friendships with Mr. Ong Beng Seng and Mr. Lam Kok Seng. For example, Mr. Ong had invited Iswaran on the trip to Qatar, which he took urgent personal leave to go on. Throughout the exchange, Iswaran was seen occasionally taking notes, at one point shaking his head during an argument between the lawyers over the basis of the initial corruption charges against the former public servant. The hearing was then adjourned and Iswaran left the court at around 4 p.m, stopping briefly to address the media.
As you know, my lawyers have stated the position clearly, and as you're well aware, the matter is now sub judice. So it's not appropriate for me to say anything more.
The judge has asked both sides for more submissions by Thursday. Iswaran will be sentenced next Thursday.
The Attorney General's Chambers says it considered several factors in deciding whether to amend the corruption charges against S Iswaran. One was the litigation risks involved, improving the charges beyond reasonable doubt, given that there are two primary parties to the transactions, and both would have an interest in denying corruption. AGC also considered whether the amendment would lead to a fair and just outcome that is in line with the public's interest. It adds that it will soon take a decision on Mr. Ong Beng Seng.